Hello and welcome to the You and You podcast with me, Sanjiv Sangha. Every episode, I look at a word and how it shaped my life and how I worked through that problem. And I hope that it gives you some insight or some top tips on how you may move through an issue. Today's word is language, and I really like this one. Did you know language may have started 2 million years ago? More research, though, does suggest that it's more like 50,000 years ago. Depends where you look. Language developed into a written form when agricultural industries to develop, and it became a new technology to support agriculture. My mother tongue or first language is Punjabi. It's a language that originates from a state of Punjab, which is in the north of India and crosses over to Pakistan. Your mother tongue is a language you have grown up speaking from an early childhood. What has always fascinated me and stayed with me about language is that if you speak in a certain language, you can think in a different way. It sounds bizarre, right? I first came across this concept when I was working with a German girl and she was dating a Chinese colleague and she decided to start learning Mandarin. And she said it gave her a really good understanding of her boyfriend's thought process as the words were put together in such a different way to English and German. I was astounded by this. There's been significant research on this. And as people may use a different language, their perspective might change. And the research says that they can feel like different people too. They may also arrive at a different solution depending on the language that they're speaking in at that time. Some of this will be because there are no translatable words. I am bilingual and I've never considered myself as bilingual. I think that's partially because I've always associated the word with someone who speaks different European languages, because that's the context that I've normally heard it in. And whilst looking into this, I've learned the term balanced bilinguals. And that is where a child is completely fluent and feels that neither is their native language, as they have a grasp for both of those so perfectly. This is a completely different concept to me. And I think part of it is because I thought my Punjabi was weaker, but I've realised over time I know more than I think, and this is a lovely realisation. In the past, I've rebelled against it a lot. It's taken me a long time to start seeing myself and have an understanding of who I am. After so long of trying to fit into something, and I don't even know what that something was, I'm starting to discover me, which is super fun. This is a bit of a recent story linked into my childhood. As I said, I'm British born and with a Punjabi as my first language. My family spoke to me in Punjabi when I was born, and to this day I still communicate with my mum and my uncles and aunts in Punjabi. There was definitely a potential for me to have spoken in English at home and not have learnt Punjabi. My sisters were school children or young adults themselves when I was born, and they definitely will have been speaking to each other in English. The general rule was, from my dad, and he would try and enforce it, bless him, didn't do it very well, to try and keep us connected to our heritage, is that he wanted us to speak Punjabi to each other at home. That never happened. We did speak to my parents in Punjabi though. No one talked to me in English until I went to school, at which point I'm told I picked it up super quick. I was surrounded by it and the TV would have been on. Punjabi is a combination of Sanskrit and some Persian and Arabic influences. So in some ways, this means I can very loosely understand some Hindi and Urdu. Yay! When I say loosely, I mean a tiny bit. And I'll take what I can here. Why not? I wasn't the best at languages at school. Within my own understanding of how I speak and upon reflection, and I say this is my thought, because individuals may see this situation as something quite different. And this has to be highlighted as a concept in itself. You could be having a conversation with me. Our recollections of it will differ and change over time about what was said, and that will be dependent on how we may have been feeling at the time, if it had any impact on us, if it struck a nerve, and also the story shifts and our perspectives change. The only way for it to be remembered in a coherent way is if it was recorded, like meeting minutes, for example. So a conversation that we may have had a year ago, we may have very different recollections for the people that were partaking in them, and a very different impact on us. Back to language. As I was growing up back in the day, language that was used with me was very functional and instructional. Feelings didn't come into it. It was very much of, you need to go do this, go to sleep, eat this. I didn't really know about expressing myself. I definitely understood fear and understood anger, and I saw despair. Throughout this, I've never felt unloved. Just because I've used some quite heavy words there, I just need to highlight that. There were points when I didn't understand what was going on around me because there were a lot of heightened emotions, and I'll come to that. At school, we were taught how to memorize words instead of putting them together, and to this day, I struggle with new words until I hear it said. So you might hear me saying something in a very different way to what it actually is. Now that's just part of me, and it doesn't upset me. It's just, I'm all right with the making mistakes. We all make mistakes. But fast forward a few decades, I'm in leadership roles at work, along with my architectural work, where all my working life, all emotion has to be stripped out of the communication, quite contractual, no excessive words. Language that was used again was functional and technical. I used to sometimes give people a call prior to sending an email so that they knew what was going to land on their desk, especially if they were behind with work or there was a problem with their work. So then mid-COVID, I moved back to London and I was living alone. I was working hard in isolation, and unbeknown to me, I was becoming more and more anxious. I was reading a book, a workbook, trying to understand myself better and the choices that I was making and had made. And one of the pages on this came up with a list of 9 different families of emotions. And it consisted of sad, playful, depressed, angry, loving, peaceful, happy, afraid, and confused. They were then divided up again. So where you might have angry, there was agitated, bitter, enraged, exasperated, furious, irritated, mad, resentful. And at the other end of the spectrum, there may be playful, which was broken down into childlike and free and light-hearted, whimsical and spontaneous. I was amazed. It blew my mind. I was bouncing for weeks after this discovery. As up until then, I realized my language was relatively simple and I couldn't communicate how I was feeling at any point. And I hadn't been that happy in years. And it's so simple. There was so much joy there. But what a tool. There was such a big release around it. Knowing the words to describe how I was feeling, instead of just depressed or angry, I could use despondent, which was much better, and it gave me clarity about how I was feeling. So it wasn't about me being able to communicate it, it was just about me understanding how I was feeling. That joy was such a great feeling. My language has definitely been functional and technical. I can talk at length about anything related to architecture and construction, swallow you up into the depths of the detail around it. But when it comes to expressing myself with words, it was like I was illiterate, especially when you can hear others being so eloquent and the way they use it is so beautiful and so expressive and cutting sometimes. And I just thought, well, oh God, I can't do it. I've got dyslexia. I haven't tested myself for that, but language, words, they're not my thing. Well, actually, it's everybody's. I'm here to tell you that. It's all of ours. They say most communication is through the physical body. People have always said my face is way too expressive and that I shouldn't wear my heart on my sleeve or get a thicker skin. Language is a tool. 55% of communication is through the body, language. 38% is on the tone of how something is being said, and 7% is on actually what you're saying. So apparently I've been effective in many different ways in what I'm trying to convey, but not as well as I would have liked. And I have to confess now, I do feel a little bit sheepish. I haven't always had the best language. And there's no excuses. I've gone through phases of swearing. I've been given money boxes for swearing. And it was, I think, a way of venting emotion. Not at people. So I wouldn't swear people and call people names. It was, if I did that, it's a very personal context, and it was always in a fun and a loving way. But even then, don't do it. It's just not worth it. I have sworn a lot in the past. And what used to surprise me is when I heard other people swearing near me, I really didn't like it. So it gave me a chance to reflect on the use of my language and, give me the opportunity to calm it down. Words have always been a wonder to me and how to articulate them. I liked the word magnets on the fridges that you get, whether it's to make sentences or whether it's funny or just plain rude. I appreciate that I'm nowhere near the master of them, but I appreciate that I can always learn if I want to. Choice is such a great thing. And just to know that you have access to something. At work, I used to memorize all the facts and requirements about buildings. And I soon learned that they were always changing. So I decided to relax how I remembered them. And in doing that, I learned where they were all located. That enabled me to be able to access them quickly and check. So I knew that whatever I was doing was on point. And so that just gave me a different way of looking at things. So give yourself that option. Giving yourself the gift of language to be able to articulate your feelings is so helpful in all your relationships, including your relationship with yourself. For you to be able to pinpoint exactly what you are feeling and communicate it effectively, what a start. It can leave you feeling free and lighthearted. I'm looking forward to doing some bonus episodes, so please send me through some questions that you might have on Instagram. You can direct message me on Sanjiv Sangha, or you can email me at hello@sanjivsangha.com. Please hit the subscribe button if you'd like to listen to some more. And thank you for listening. Have a top-tastic day.